Welcome back to Big Mouth and welcome to Wednesday's edition of the dceu Daily. Remember, you can tag me on Twitter and, of course, follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. The inception of the DCEU. Now, later on, I'm going to read you an article from comicbook.com suggesting because of Daniel Richman is actually saying that Danny DeVito's Penguine from the Burton Batman Returns movie will cameo in Andy Muschietti's Flashpoint. But before we go there, because that's a very important article, because they quote Walter Hamada from that infamous New York Times article. But first, let's talk about the inception of the DC Extended Universe. I want to be clear here that you lot who know me understand I'm a very balanced individual. I have no bias towards anything or anyone. Most importantly, I'm a DC fan. I'm a fan of the comics, the animation, the movies. I love DC, but Superman is my main character from the whole comics and everything. But anyway, I want you to think about this, right? So imagine the then president CEO of Warner Brothers, Kevin Tsujihara, flies out to Cyprus to meet me. Mick, I've heard all about you. You're a great, passionate DC fan. Have a cigar. All right, Big Kev, what can I do for you? Can I use your pool? Maybe later, mate. What do you want? So we're thinking of starting a DC Extended Universe, a bit like what the MCU are doing. We want to try and catch up with that blah-de-blah-de-blah. Who would you bring in to run that franchise or to lead the films? I don't think the first name on the top of my head would be Zack Snyder. Do you? I love Man of Steel. I love Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice. Always have to put that out there because people are always ready to jump on you, whatever you say, whatever opinion you have. But it goes back to Christopher Nolan. And because of his success with the Dark Knight trilogy, they wanted him to godfather the DC Extended Universe. For me, the biggest mistake in the inception of the DCEU is bringing this man in. Because he basically said, you know what, guys? I don't want to be your Kevin Feige. I don't want to run this thing. But I know a good guy, a really, really unique, great filmmaker who's going to have a great take on these DC characters. And it's Zack Snyder. And in fact, Snyder did have a really great, unique take. Personally, if Big Kev flies over to Cyprus and says, who would you bring in? I want you to godfather it, Mick. I wouldn't say bring in Zack Snyder. Now, I could look at Snyder and say maybe we could use him in a portion of the franchise a bit later on. Or even say to him, you know what, Zack, we've got a great story. We just want you to purely direct the movie because we love your VFX and we love the way you direct a movie. Maybe something that's a bit out there. Absolutely. But I wouldn't choose Zack Snyder to run the whole thing. Now, ironically, if they allowed Snyder to finish his Justice League movies, he would have been gone after that anyway. We would have had the Batman from Ben Affleck. Everything would have been done. You know, Affleck was going to be killed off in one of the Justice League sequels as well. There would have been no issue. You could have allowed the critics to bitch and whine and everyone to say the DCEU's broken. And do all those videos. How can you fix the DCEU? He would have been gone. The whole thing, that chapter would have been gone. Then they could have brought someone in they wanted to bring in. But they didn't do that. They got nervous. But you cannot start a movie franchise with Christopher Nolan, then him saying, I don't want to mould the clay, bringing in Zack Snyder. But in the background, you've got the DC Entertainment Mafia, like Jeff Johns and the rest of them, because they want to say what's going on. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're watching your favourite chef, but all of a sudden the TV network says, I know, let's have all the TV chefs in one kitchen. It's a really small kitchen, but we can have them all in there. That was the problem with the inception of the DCEU. Now, Snyder's take, after all said and done, is very unique. But the problem with Snyder is he's not everybody's cup of tea. Now, Warner Brothers had already seen what happened with Watchmen, a film I really like personally, but not everybody does, including the die-hard Watchmen graphic novel fans. A lot of people took issue with that film, not me, because I've never read the graphic novels. But they saw the reaction to that film, so surely they understood by allowing Snyder to have a free rein, it was going to be problematic. Now, Man of Steel had a little divisive reaction, mainly because of the neck snapping. Why did I do the action there? The neck snapping of Michael Shannon's Zod, because Superman mainly doesn't kill in the comics or in the Reeve movies. Now, people have put it out there that he killed General Zod and the other two villains from Krypton. He didn't. They slid down the fortress. They were trapped somewhere, and that was it. He probably shoved them back in the Phantom Zone. I don't know what he did. We didn't see him kill them, so he didn't kill them. And you can bore on about that until you're blue in the face. And so the whole inception of this franchise was so wrong. There's so many voices, and you've got Jeff Johns behind the scenes seething. This is a DC purist who's been writing comics for years, and he's seen, from his point of view, not mine, he's seeing this guy kind of bringing everything to the real world, which is sacrilege to someone like Johns, because he believes in the elements of the escapism of these DC characters. Now, we can debate, is it right, is it wrong to bring fantasy characters like this in a real-world scenario? I don't think it's wrong. I think it works, but it doesn't work for a mainstream audience. Don't forget, Man of Steel released around 5 years after the MCU started, after the first Iron Man started. It was, I think, a year or so after the first Avengers movie, Avengers Assemble, right? A massive success. So audiences, not just Marvel fans, but audiences had decided that's the kind of thing that they wanted to see. Now, I think the MCU is a great movie franchise. It's not anything that's going to be remembered in 30 or 40 years. Probably the kind of money and success it had and the love some people had for it will be remembered. But the individual movies, apart from a couple, probably not. But when you look at the MCU, if you're Kevin Tsujihara, who was in charge back then, and you're making these decisions, what you do is, if you're in Cyprus talking to me, I'm going to say, do you know what, Kevin? I don't think we should go down the comedy element that they do. We should still have a few gags in our movies. We should still get a few giggles in places, which I think is important in these movies. But it shouldn't be wholeheartedly funny. But then again, the MCU isn't wholeheartedly funny. But then again, sometimes they'll crack a joke after someone's died. And a lot of people think that's a bit off. I think that's a bit off. But what you take from what Feige's done with the MCU is the connectivity. Fans, comic book fans, love connectivity. The reason why everyone loved the first Avengers movie is because we had a build-up of Iron Man, Captain America, the Hulk, all of these characters, right? And Thor, right? Forget the Hulk, because the connectivity there's a bit off because they changed Ed Norton to Ruffalo, right? But the other characters all had an individual movie. So what you've already seen them, and then you're seeing them together. That's the whole reason why Joss Whedon's first Avengers movie is so successful. I think Whedon did a really good job with it. But Whedon is a bit like Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman 2017. There's a false kind of legacy there that Whedon and Jenkins are the only person responsible for those classic movies. They're not. Feige was doing a lot of things in the background, and there was other people penning the story as well. So Whedon was probably about 25% responsible for how good that movie was. And the other elements, just like Wonder Woman 2017, also were responsible, probably more responsible for how good those movies were. But, yeah, as I say, what you say to Big Kev, if he comes and flies here to meet me in Cyprus, I'd say, yeah, so the element of the connectivity and the crossover capacity is very important. So Man of Steel and BVS, even though they're darker takes and they're put in the real world, there is connectivity from Man of Steel to BVS. For Christ's sake, we see Batfleck's kind of perspective of the battle on Metropolis. It's great. So already you're seeing a shared universe being built, and even in Suicide Squad, a film that wasn't reviewed very well but made some money, had Batman, had Captain Boomerang, The Flash, all of that, right? So already and lots of mentions and name drops of Superman. So the first three movies did have connectivity, but the difference between the connectivity in the MCU and the DCEU, let's just say in the DCEU's first three films, is very different, because the dark tone remains and the connectivity isn't about a bit of banter just to see the other characters connect. It was trying to connect the story more. This basically, what Feige and Snyder were both trying to do is build up to a team-up movie. This is what Snyder's doing. He's building up to his Justice League trilogy. And in my opinion, he's doing it really well. Now, it all begins to go a bit caca, as Sam Beckett says to Al in Quantum Leap. Do you watch that show? I love that show. And then with Wonder Woman, the first film, as great as it was, there was very little, there wasn't much shared with what went on in the first three films, apart from seeing those Wayne Enterprises trucks, right, to bring the photo on the truck. Apart from that, there is no connectivity from the first three movies. So it becomes problematic because already it's like you're getting a tree and you're trying to cut them down before they die, right? And this is what happens with the DC Extended Universe. Already, there's a lack of faith in what Snyder's trying to do, not because they don't like Snyder, not because they don't respect him as a unique filmmaker and storyteller. It's because the reaction and the purse strings are not working out. They're not making the money they projected, and the negativity around his first two movies and Suicide Squad, a film he had a little bit to do with as well, but David Ayer wrote and directed it, they already cut that film to pieces and reshot elements of it. So already they're chasing the hare, which is the MCU, but they can't catch up because they've gone down the direction that is divisive. Now, you know my thoughts on these first three movies. Even though they cut Suicide Squad to pieces, I quite enjoyed that movie. And BVS and MOS were going in a good direction. But again, not for the mainstream. Now, you're sharing at this screen and saying, Mick, who gives a fuck about the mainstream? Studios do. It's a business. And there's no reason why you can't, mix in tones. For example, you've got a film like Avengers Assemble, right? Which is a great, bantery, awesome, action-packed movie. But then you've got Captain America, the Winter Soldier. So in this franchise already, the MCU, they've had a lot of lighter films, but that's a darker film. And if Patty Jenkins ever wants to see how you do a sequel, watch Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Watch that film, Patty, because what that film does, it really gives great payoffs. The compelling friendship between Bucky and Captain America, right? Is it Steve? Steve Rogers, that's it. Nearly said Steve Trevor, but so I don't know the Captain America comics, and so when I find out the Winter Soldier is actually Bucky, and I'm like Steve Rogers, I'm like Captain America, I'm discovering this at the same time, and I found that such a compelling moment. It is such a good film in its own right. It's one of the really good films that will be remembered in 30 or 40 years' time. It's how a sequel should be done. It's literally the Dark Knight of the MCU. It is a brilliant film, and everything about that film works. Even Robert Redford as the villain. A lot of people, me included, don't think that the MCU has given us too many great villains, but then you can look at the MCU like Wonder Woman 2017. That franchise and that film isn't really about the villains. It's about the heroes, which I find kind of interesting, and it kind of works. So already, you've heard me say that I wouldn't have chose Zack, even though I like his two DC movies, and I'm sure I'm going to love Zack Snyder's Justice League. And by the way, I'm hearing in the forests and the whispers coming out that if you're not in the US and you don't have HBO Max, it will probably not be released on other streaming services. But before you lose your shit, and I hope you can all afford to do this, Basically, when it's released in America on HBO Max, Zack Snyder's Justice League, you will be able to buy it on Blu-ray, 4K, and digital pay-per-view. So that's what you're going to be able to do. So basically, I don't want to watch it as a TV series. In fact, I think the Americans are getting the kind of short arm here. If they're first going to have to watch it as a TV series, we'll be sitting with our popcorn. Look at my telly. When that TV gets going, it don't look like very much, but when it gets going, I can't wait. So first of all, I am a fan of Zack Snyder. I am. But if I'm an executive, if I'm someone leading this thing, if I want to catch up with the MCU, if I want to create a DC universe where everyone's on board, like they are mostly with the MCU, and there are detractors of the MCU, there's no question about it. Spider-Man fans are not happy. Hulk fans are not happy, and I don't blame them. Nothing's perfect in this world, but it makes money, and the MCU makes a lot of people happy, and that's what it should be all about. All the DC Extended Universe has ever done from the very beginning is created negativity and wars. There's even wars within the Zack Snyderverse fandom. It's just breeding negativity. At least with the MCU, there's a bringing together. There's this, wow, it's an MCU film. We got the latest MCU. We've got an MCU straight to streaming Disney Plus series, haven't we? I forgot what it's going to be called, right? Blah 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 and the Witch, whatever it's called. Anyway, it's set up as this weird kind of sitcom, but there's something going on there. So I've heard from the reviews it's really good, and people are going to stream the fuck out of it, and the MCU fans are going to unite and just say how much they love it. That's what the MCU is. Wait a minute, I want to find out what it's called. How can I forget what it's called? Hang on. It's WandaVision. How can I forget that? Anyway, so WandaVision sounds like a really good experimental way of going at the MCU on Disney Plus, and there's going to be different kind of series. And this is what Kevin Feige does. He's happy to take risks. He's happy to, Now, if we look at the example of Captain Marvel is a divisive movie, not because it's a divisive movie, but because of what the lead actor was saying about men and things like that. She started to target men, white men, blah, blah, blah. It didn't go down well, and people were attacking the film and trying to make the film be a failure. Instead, it was $1 billion movie. Now, this is what I think of Captain... is it Captain... I've already bloody forgotten it. Captain Marvel, that's it. How do I forget so quickly? I'm getting old. Anyway. And so my opinion of Captain Marvel is actually it's quite a solid, good film that I think could have been even better with the fact that she's kind of this refugee that has her memories wiped and all of that. But I think it's pretty good. I think it's a really, really interesting film. I don't think it's the best CBM of all time, but I think it works. It's entertaining, and I think Brie Larson does okay, and Samuel L. Jackson being there really helps this movie. And that is how the MCU succeeds, because every film is a piece of the jigsaw. Now, the problem with Warner Brothers, especially the old regime, they got hardcore directors who all wanted creative freedom. Zack Snyder wants creative freedom. David Ayer wants creative freedom. Patty Jenkins wants creative freedom, and when she doesn't get it, she bleats to the press. The other day she was bragging how she came in for 10 years. They were talking about Wonder Woman. They didn't want to do what she wanted to do. She walked. They brought in Michelle McLaren, who wanted to do a Braveheart kind of Wonder Woman film. Boy, would I have loved to have seen that. But Warner Brothers didn't go for it. So then they said to Patty, okay, you can do your World War I movie, because they didn't want to do the World War I movie. But what she doesn't tell you, the World War I thing is basically one of the few things that she won over, and most of that movie had nothing to do with her ideas or vision. But as I go back to my point, the point is you've got these high-octane, hardcore directors who are kind of got their own vision and want their vision implemented, and they don't care. So when the studio goes, but this is part of a franchise, Patty, I don't care. I want to make my movie. That is a massive issue. You cannot have that in a shared universe. This is why Kevin Feige brings in quite unknown directors, right? This is what he does. And then eventually they become quite well known, But when most of the directors on MCU movies you haven't really heard of, right? Even Jon Favreau, we'd heard of him, but not that much. Really, his fame really began. I recognised him from Friends, of course. But he's a multi-talented guy and he did a great job with the first two Iron Man films, even though Iron Man 2 isn't a very good film and I found it quite boring. In fact, Iron Man 2 is the Wonder Woman 84 of the MCU, so even they had early problems. So the early problems were there, but you cannot have directors who insist that it's all about them, that their movies are self-contained. I mean, Patty Jenkins was so desperate to get away from Wonder Woman 2017 when it was first greenlit, Wonder Woman 84, she kept on telling us it wasn't a sequel, when it absolutely was, because what she was trying to say is that film isn't totally my vision and I want to get away from it. Well, congratulations, Patty. You did get away with it. Look at the reaction. You did get away from it. Look at people's reaction. And do you know what? All that matters are people's reactions, because films are made for people at the end of the day. This is the studio system. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but this is how it works. If the masses don't like something, then you're in trouble. And so these are the problems with the inception of the DC Extended Universe, that they totally went to the wrong people. And again, I'm going to get hate for the Zack Snyder thing, but you know I love the guy. You know I love his DCEU movies. Just remember, I helped fight to get Zack Snyder's Justice League, the Snyder Cut. Don't forget that. And I'm so excited for it. But then, after all the problems and the divisiveness and the negativity and the bitterness towards the DC Extended Universe, and then we get to the old regime's biggest mistake, and that was Justice League, where they drove Snyder off the property when they could have just let him do his thing, then move him on afterwards, and then they could have done what they wanted, right? And then it probably would have been pretty good as well, because everybody would have been satisfied. Snyder would have finished his vision. He would have said, thank you for everything. I'm just going to go and sign an exclusive deal with Netflix, which he could still do, by the way. And no one's fighting for anything. Everyone's happy. We would have seen everything he had to offer. It would have been done. But then you create this atmosphere of injustice. And this is where the whole everyone should get creative freedom. No, I don't agree with that. The way Zack was treated was despicable. But you can't do that in this game. Not when you've got a movie franchise full of iconic characters that have been going around since the late 30s and 40s. You can't do that. The DC characters are there. They can be so successful within live action, whether it's TV or up on the big screen in the movie theatre. But you've got to understand something. You've got to bring in directors who want to be part of a family, understand they're a piece of a jigsaw. And every piece of the jigsaw is important because it goes to placing the next piece of the jigsaw. But you cannot have people saying, I want a self-contained movie. I want total creative freedom. I don't care about the rest of you. Because at the end of the day, if you want creative freedom, then make other fucking movies. But don't come in to the DC Extended Universe and expect just to do your own thing and then move on. Now, this is where we come in. Walter Hamada takes over an absolute shit show. Shit show. Who knows how to sort this fucker out? You've got us lot fighting for the Snyder Cut at the time. And then you've got the situation where the last film was an absolute flop. So he's got to come in and he's got to work with James Wan, someone he's worked very closely with before, which is great. So they work together to do this Aquaman movie. Aquaman makes $1 billion. And here's the thing with DC. As much of a bad rap and reputation it's had in the past, when you do good movies that the audiences, the mainstream audiences want to see, they will come in. So Aquaman is proof of that. Shazam is proof of that. Even though the box office isn't as big as Aquaman's, it still made a profit and it was a big success both critically and financially because they didn't spend a lot of money on it. And then even when you look at something like Joker movie, which has nothing to do with the DC Extended Universe, good movies make money, right? Simple as that. Now, just because your movie doesn't make as much money as they want you to, it doesn't mean you're making a bad movie. David Ayer's Suicide Squad isn't a bad movie. Zack Snyder's DCEU films are not bad movies because they didn't make kind of Force Awakens money. But there's the thing. You're working on a franchise. So it can't just be what you want. You've got to compromise. Is like a dirty word these days with movie fans, but it's true. You are working for a studio and they are funding your project, right? So if you're making a film about two men working from place to place in the Depression, you can pretty much do what the fuck you want, as long as the adaptation isn't too off key, right? I'm talking of Mice and Men, of course. But when you're working in a movie franchise, there's an alignment that should be happening. There should be an arc. Now, credit to Snyder, he was working through an arc, a Justice League arc, a Superman arc, and it would have been beautiful, and it's still going to be beautiful. Now, the question still remains, will Snyder continue his DC vision over on HBO Max, or will Snyder in the studio just say, do you know what? This is it. Zack's just signed an exclusive deal with Netflix. If you want to see his stuff, go over there. And, who knows, Zack might create his own superhero franchise one day, which we'll all look forward to seeing, including me. It's very interesting. But, again, Warner Media are here to make money. So there's no reason why Snyder can't continue with his little element of the DC Extended Universe over on HBO Max. And Flashpoint could sort that out so it all makes sense why Zack's universe is separate to other universes. It can all make sense, right? So that's that thing. But the whole creation of the DCU, the DC Extended Universe, was a mistake from the very beginning. They did it wrong. They did it wrong. You need someone there who understands what everyone wants wholeheartedly. And then later on, you can bring someone like Snyder in to have his own little franchise as a part of the whole universe when it's actually successful and it can sustain divisive, controversial movies. What you don't do, you don't launch with divisive, controversial movies, because then the reputation of that franchise from the very off is poisonous. And guess what? The reputation of the DCEU at its very inception is poisonous. And now we have it. So this brings me to my next point. Reading this comicbook.com article about Danny DeVito's Joker? Penguin being in Andy Machete's Flashpoint. Here we go. The Flash movie rumour. Danny DeVito's Batman villain, the Penguin, could return. Michael Keaton's 3 decades after... Let's start again. 3 decades after he menaced Michael Keaton's Dark Knight in Batman Returns, a new rumour claims Warner Brothers is looking to bring back Danny DeVito's Penguin for a cameo appearance in The Flash, in the Andy Muschietti-directed Justice League spin-off. Starring Ezra Miller as the speedy superhero, Keaton will reprise his role for the first time since Tim Burton's 1992 Batman sequel, when The Flash races into theatres in 2022. It's with Ben Affleck back as the Batman of the DC Extended Universe and Keaton's Batman from the DC Multiverse, and the older crime fighter won't be alone, according to a new report. Scooper Daniel Richman, that's Daniel RPK to you, on Patreon claims The Flash wants Danny DeVito to cameo as Oswald Cobblepot, whose Burtonverse counterpart died at the end of Batman Returns. Now, this is interesting because even though he does die, what Barry has done, he's kind of trapped Michael Keaton's Batman in an alternate universe, I think, which means the Penguin could still be alive. But I think that would be the explanation for it. I think this is great. This is the benefits of Flashpoint. This is the benefits of the multiverse strategy. Details surrounding Keaton's involvement in The Flash are limited, but early reports stated he would play a Nick Fury-type role as a mentor appearing in multiple movies, according to a June report from The Wrap. Keaton is the same Bruce Wayne from the 2 Burton films. That same report stated The Flash disregards the 2 sequels that followed without Burton and Keaton. Yes, that's true. This is true, by the way. The Flash disregards the 2 sequels that followed without Burton and Keaton. The Val Kilmer starring Batman Forever and George Clooney's franchise-ending Batman and Robin. In December, Muschietti teased Flash goes to a place where the DC universe hasn't gone before, hinting at a crossover made possible only through the multiverse. Weeks later, DC Films president Walter Hamada told the New York Times audiences are sophisticated enough to understand the multiverse, which allows for a Ben Affleck Batman, a Keaton Batman, and a Robert Pattinson Batman on a new Earth. So this is what Walter Hamada said about the multiverse in that controversial New York Times article. The multiverse really opens the door for us to do more crossovers. Right. Let's talk about that first line. The Flash movie, the multiverse, allows us to do more crossovers. And there lies the issue. Something we haven't seen since Justice League. We've seen the Aquaman movie, which basically name drops Steppenwolf. We have seen Shazam, which has a lot of kind of references to BVS and MOS, which is great. And we get that Superman body double, but it's not really the way you do things. But you could tell with that, they were trying to lead in to bringing Superman into the Shazam universe, which is really exciting. And so this is why I believe in what Walter Hamada and Peter Safran are doing, because they do want to go down this element of crossovers and a more interconnected universe, which would be amazing. To really establish this idea that there can be a Flash on TV and a Flash in the movies, Hamada said during the virtual DC Fandom event over the summer, you don't have to pick one or the other. You can love both on one Earth. You have Gal Gadot and Jason Momoa and Ezra as this Justice League, and you can continue telling these stories while on another Earth you can have more grounded, real year 2 Batman in the Batman. You see what we're going to get, the best of both worlds. But this is interesting. Listen to what he says again. You can love both on one Earth. Listen to this. You can have Gal Gadot and Jason Momoa and Ezra Miller as this Justice League. He names those 3 people. He doesn't name Henry Cavill, does he? Or Ben Affleck. Now that's interesting. Now that kind of tells you what kind of Justice League we're getting. So those 3 will remain. But Batman and Superman, well, we're getting a new Batman and Superman. And how do they do this? So this is very interesting. Because does the DC Extended Universe we've seen since MOS still exist as the central universe? Or will it be another universe? And a new central universe will be built up. It's very interesting and very exciting. So where are we? And you can continue telling these stories. While on another Earth, you can have more of a grounded real year 2 Batman. Asked about the open secret that is his Batman return in The Flash, Keaton told Jimmy Kimmel in October that he can't confirm anything and we're having discussions, as they say. We're talking about it. We'll see if that happens. Interesting. Let's hope it does. I think it does, or it wouldn't have been leaked to the press, so nothing to worry about there. But yeah, there's that article. And I think this actually sums up what I'm talking about, that the mentality of Zack Snyder, even though it was slightly divisive, and as I said, he wouldn't be the guy I'd go to if I wanted to create this DC Extended Universe that everyone would embrace, not at first anyway. But the idea what he got right was creating an arc, having crossovers and cameos, as he did in BVS and as he did in Suicide Squad, right? And once they were trying to push him out, that stopped. So we had Wonder Woman, no cameo. Justice League, obviously, they're all together. Didn't work. Aquaman, no crossovers or cameos. But Shazam did actually have some references, which was good. Birds of Prey kind of fed off the first Suicide Squad movie. And then you got Wonder Woman 84, which basically doesn't do anything apart from play a beautiful lie. And there lies the problem. Patty Jenkins doesn't want to come to the party. And because she's so stubborn and she doesn't want to have a connective kind of DC Extended Universe vibe in her movies, she goes, oh, fuck it, I'm under pressure here. I better put a beautiful lie in there. There's the problem. I suspect that's why Hans Zimmer was put forward to do the music, which is really great in the film, by the way. And so you have this situation. And the core issue is when you get these directors who don't want to be part of a puzzle, don't want to be part of a franchise, then you know they shouldn't be part of a franchise. In comes James Gunn for the Suicide Squad movie. This is someone that Peter Safran brought in, Walter Hamada's working partner. And they're a great partnership, by the way. It was a good move. It was the right move. And I know fans of the Snyderverse won't agree with that, but I believe it was a great move. And so you've got James Gunn, who's used to working within a franchise where he will do his thing and he wants to do his thing, but he isn't against being a part of that jigsaw puzzle. And that's important going forward, because I think we're going to get more directors like him going forward and less directors like Patty Jenkins. And this can only be a good thing for the franchise. She may have directed a great Wonder Woman movie. She may have directed a great monster movie. It means shit when we know the truth of the first Wonder Woman movie. And let's just say it wasn't all totally about what she did, right? It's more about what she didn't do and what other people did. So anyway, we need to move forward. And now I know that the way Walter Hamada and Peter Safran are thinking. And they're thinking cameos, shared universes, story arcs, but also a franchise that can go self-contained on other Earths, but the central Earth will have an arc. But the all-round arc will be within this multiverse strategy and maybe a hidden threat from one of the multi-Earths coming to threaten the whole of the multiverse. And that would be exciting. So this is a very ambitious move from Walter Hamada. I hope it works. I think it's the right way to go, because the inception of the DC Extended Universe was wrong from the very beginning. Comment down below, like, share and subscribe, and I'll be back tomorrow with even more DCEU Daily. See you again soon.